Hey guys, I'm Sai and welcome to Ace Podcast Nation. On the channel, we have interviews, content, and podcasts on all sorts of things from football to wrestling to mental health, conspiracy theories, films and TV, and much, much more. This is the Danny Batten Show, episode number 16. It is the Danny Batten Fight Show, not the MMA show any longer for the time being anyway. It's the fight show because we are not just covering mixed martial arts, we are covering boxing. Even though there is no current events, we are rolling back the years with some classics. But just before we do get into that, if you check out Ace Podcast Nation, the video is all up at youtube.com/Ace Podcast Nation for every single show. You can also find the audio for every single show at pod.co/Ace-Cast-Nation. And that's all the shows, video and audio. And it's also available on all your usual podcasting apps and platforms. You can find the links at that website. We have lots and lots of shows coming up at the moment. I've got so many recorded and ready to drop. It's unreal. So I've extended it. So we now have a live show Monday, which is the Andy Campbell Football Show, 7:30, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter live. Then Wednesday, we have the Danny Batten Fight Show. Friday, we have the Boot and the Limp, which is myself and stand-up comedian Barry Phillips, and we just take an adult look at and a light-hearted look at the world and its goings on. And then every Sunday we drop a new show with a brand new guest, and we have so many new shows and guests coming up. We have shows with Cage Warriors star Luke Shanks, TalkSport US editor Alex McCarthy. We have dropped a show today with author and Leicester City fan Riaz Khan, which is exceptionally interesting, and I've had a lot of feedback from that show already. It is it's not what I think some people will expect from that author in that book, but it's exceptionally interesting and very thought-provoking. So check it out. We've also got loads and loads of shows which we've already released and recorded, such as we've got Tom Mearns, we've had Jack Shaw of the UFC, Brett Johns of the UFC, Modestus from the UFC, Omar Elliott from Cage Warriors. I also recorded a show with Jack Shaw's father, who's a top MMA trainer, Richard Shaw. That'll be out sometime in the next couple of weeks. Very interesting chat with him again. Just like my co-host, he's very knowledgeable when it comes to mixed martial arts. And it was a real interesting chat talking to Richard. So yeah, plenty to look forward to. We've got shows with footballers, fighters, authors, doctors, anything you want. So, without further ado, please welcome my co-host, Mr. Danny Batten, former Cage Warriors champion, MMA legend. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, very good, Si.
Oh, how's your week been?
Yeah. Very much the same. It's kind of feeling normal now with all this lockdown. It's actually, it just feels regular.
Yeah, it's weird. Funny enough, the show which I dropped earlier with Riaz Khan, he said it's very much like you're in prison. You kind of get up, you have your breakfast, you have your 3 meals a day, you have an hour's exercise, you have an hour to go outside or whatever, and it's just very regimented.
That's right.
If you're following the rules, of course. There's plenty of people still not doing that, but I'm not gonna waste my time ranting about that again. Of course, this show brought to you by Away Day Apparel. Please visit www.awaydayapparel.co.uk. They got the latest clothes and offers there. You can see that they've dropped a load of new products in the last couple of weeks. Some beautiful, beautiful t-shirts. And especially for viewers and listeners of Ace Podcast Nation, if you use the code AA Podcast Nation, all in lowercase, you may get 10% off your order. Just put that code in, and it's AA Podcast Nation, all in lowercase at the checkout, and you'll get 10% off your order. There's a couple of really, really nice products which they've brought out, and I also know what's coming in the next couple of months from them, and it is beautiful. Some game-changing stuff. Hopefully they will send me some, but I might have to put my hand in my pocket for that, I'm afraid. Disgraceful paying for such things. But I gotta say, it's well worth the money. They it's not even just the look of them, it's the quality of them. There's such good quality. And like, I got a thing about clothes anyway, but like particularly my t-shirts and stuff, like, it's not just about the label or the brand. I need it to be good quality and like good materials and stuff, and they certainly do that. And I believe, well, I don't believe, I know that they use like recyclable products and what's the word, like green products and stuff like that. So there's nothing, it's all good for the environment as well as looking good. So check them out. You can also check them out on Twitter and Instagram. Instagram is at awayday_apparel and Twitter is at awayday_apparel. Give them a shout as well on social media. Tell them that I sent you. And there you go. We thank them for sponsoring the Danny Batten Show, of course. We'll have to get you, Danny. We'll have to get you a T-shirt, mate.
Yes.
Get you an Away Day Apparel T-shirt.
Yeah, I'll get myself
one. I have to speak to the boss man, get him to send you one up. Well, you don't follow football, do you? So, because a lot of the T-shirts, there's like, one of the lines that they've got is like in different football teams' colours. Well, not that, it hasn't got like the football team badge or anything on it. It's just the general colours. So, what are you, Northampton Town? What do they play in? What colour do Northampton Town play in? You gotta know that. You live in the bloody town.
No, I have no idea.
So if I said to you, like, you have to pick a football team to support, who would you say?
Well, I always had supported as a sort of like young kid Liverpool. That's all, and that was because my bigger brother always followed Liverpool, so I sort of like just followed suit with him for a little while. But he stayed heavily interested in it, and I didn't. He played for football teams and all sorts as a kid. I did briefly, but not to the extent that my brother did. Yeah, it was just never my passion.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid to tell you that you won't be able to have a red and white one, because I know that all the red and white ones are being saved until the Euros next year, because that's the colours that Wales play in, and I know he's saving them ones. But funny you should say about Liverpool. On Wednesday, I am interviewing or having on the show the lead singer of the 90s bands The Farm is coming on the show, who's a big Scouse fan. I'm really looking forward to that, because they were a big part of my teens. The Farm. That's some classic songs. You familiar with them, Danny?
No, not too familiar.
Oh gosh, shocking! They sang what did they sing? All Together Now. It's one of their biggest hits.
Oh right, yeah, okay, yeah. Now you just said that, it's just twigged who they are. Yes, I will know.
All Together Now and Groovy Train, I think, was another one. They had quite a lot of hits actually. But I'm really looking forward to that, because not just talk about the music, but he's a very intelligent chap. He's got plenty to say on the world. So I'm looking forward to that one. It's a big one for me personally.
Yeah.
So today, mate, there's no real kind of big news in the world of mixed martial arts, I don't think, this week. I think, judging by some of the stuff I've heard and read, I think it won't be too long before the UFC is up and running again, because I believe that they've basically got permission to run from the Apex Center, which is their training center in Las Vegas, from about 2 or 3 weeks' time. So I don't think it's going to be too long before we're going to have shows. And I've got a feeling they're going to probably put on about 3 shows a week once they do start running, because I think they'll try and catch up. I think they'll probably put Cage Warriors shows on from there as well, providing they can get private jets from the UK to the Las Vegas. Knowing the way Dana White's been, they probably land the private jet in the middle of the desert and walk, or get an Uber from the desert to the place. He does seem quite desperate, but I don't think it's going to be long, mate. But I don't think you're too bothered from a show point of view. I don't think you're too worried, because you quite like covering the classic stuff, don't you?
Yeah. I'm loving the retro stuff, I've got to say. And I do find myself drifting back, every so often looking at some of the old school stuff anyways. But yeah, it has been nice.
Well, funny enough, when I finished UFC 4 today, I really wanted to go on to watch UFC 5. I was like, oh, I gotta watch it. I'm gonna have to wait. I'm gonna wait. And I did stop myself, but I was eager to watch the next one. Very interesting overall. You know, we watched UFC 4. We watched Joe Calzaghe versus Bernard Hopkins, and we watched Renzo Gracie versus Sakuraba, which again, very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start, mate?
Well, you lead the way, Si, and I'll just follow suit. Not a problem.
So what, should we stick with our format from last week, is it? And we'll go with the boxing and then into the UFC, and then we'll sort of skip over not skip over, but give a brief thing of the Renzo and Sakuraba.
Yeah.
So yes. So Joe Calzaghe versus Bernard Hopkins. I think it was closer than the one we watched last week. Obviously, last week we watched Roy Jones Jr. versus Joe Calzaghe.
Very one-sided affair, that one. But this one was a little different.
12 rounds, wasn't it?
Yeah, Hopkins just looked like he was a better counter puncher than Jones last week. He seemed to trouble Joe Calzaghe more, make it a little harder. It wasn't like Joe had his own way, although I think he initially was dominant over all the rounds initially. When you look at their punch count over the entirety of the fight, it would look like it was very one-sided, but it was actually quite difficult work trying to nail shots on Hopkins.
Yeah, I think as well. The other thing is, I thought Joe he took a little bit of time to get into his rhythm early on.
Yeah.
He got knocked down in the first round, which, it was cleaner than last week's knockdown, which was with a forearm. But he didn't look, in any kind of danger of, being stopped or anything like that. And I think after that first couple of rounds, once he settled into a rhythm, Joe Calzaghe looked pretty good then, I thought, all the way through.
Yeah.
He didn't win every round, but I thought he did pretty well, all things considering. We've had a couple of requests as well for what boxing to cover next week, which I'll get into a bit later. A couple of Nigel Benn fights, actually.
Oh, right, yeah.
I'll tell you what they are now. There's no need to. So one of them was Eubank versus Ben, and the other one was Nigel Benn versus McClelland.
All right, yeah.
So we'll pick one of those a bit later on, and we'll get into it and see what's what, as it were. I will get into it. I'm struggling. My second screen is not playing ball, so I'm having problems bringing up the fights. So if you want to make a start with round one, just while I try and fix this little issue, that'd be great.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, well, as you know, it was almost a carbon copy the first round of Jones. You stated about that he got knocked down very, very early, and I'm surprised that Hopkins didn't perhaps try and follow up on it and put more pressure on Joe Calzaghe. I thought he might try to really put more of a stamp down after that little knockdown, because that come really early. It was kind of a bit of a shocker, really, seeing him put down like that, because I think overall he wasn't put down in his fight very often at all in his career, Joe. But other than that, it was quite an even looking round. Hopkins just looking really good, although he was initially put on the outer fringes of the ring. His counter right cross, it was just really nice. He just didn't have the power to really look consequential with it when he was landing it, but nevertheless it was a nice scoring punch. So initially, just to sum up that round, even without the knockdown, you could put argument that Hopkins was a little crisper in that round. It was a good round for Hopkins initially. He couldn't have asked for a much better start, but just surprised he didn't put it on him a little bit more with that knockdown. Maybe he knew this was probably going to go into late rounds.
yeah, I think he probably anticipated that he was going into deep water.
Mm.
But I was surprised. You're right, because once he did knock him down, I assumed he was going to try and, like you say, pour it on him, try and get that early stoppage.
Yeah.
Because you knew if he didn't do that, that it would only be a matter of time before Joe Calzaghe sat behind his jab and started to really work those body shots. And
Sure.
and it was, that's as it pretty much as it went.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Bernard Hopkins took that first round. I think that's not really a debate. Which I did notice that at the start of the fight, the American commentators were kind of saying, "Oh yeah, Hopkins, one of the greatest boxers of all time. It's but Joe Calzaghe's, it's his biggest challenge. It's the best fighter he's ever fought." And I thought, the American commentators for the American guy, Ganica. But then by about round 6 or 7, they were saying, "Oh yeah, Bernard Hopkins, he's 43. He's probably past his best."
Yes, I did notice this.
And it was like, "Oh come on, it's like this in the same fight. Like at least if you're going to say it like at different times. Don't." I just I don't know, left a bit of a taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, mate. I'm having real trouble bringing up my thing, so I'm gonna have to let you lead the way.
That's fine. Very, very similar to, other than the knockdown, very, very similar to the first round. This was really quite an even looking round. I think work rate was always going to go Joe's favour, but his work was looking a little bit messy. I really like the footwork of Hopkins. He looks much more elusive than Jones from last week. And just was very good that even when they sort of like were engaging from outward in towards the clinch, he was so good at keeping his head out of harm's way. And really, it was hard for Joe to look good. The only negative factor was that if anyone's back was touching the ropes, it was always Hopkins. But he was still, for my money, still being quite effective there. Overall, a fairly even round, but I'd still suggest slightly crisper work from Hopkins. And, I wouldn't have been surprised if judges had scored that one in his favour again.
Yeah, I thought so. And I thought that was actually a story of a lot of the fight was that Bernard Hopkins, even later on in the rounds, he was really struggling to kind of contain Joe, and he was really struggling to impose any of his own attacking game.
Yeah.
But what he did do differently to Roy Jones Jr. is when he got tired and frustrated, he made sure that he wasn't just an easy target sat in front of Joe Calzaghe. If you remember, like last week, we were saying Roy Jones Jr. was just literally sat there in front of him. He didn't move his feet, just take body shot, face shot. And, Bernard Hopkins, even at 43, he was still, he still had that body movement to make himself elusive.
I liked his footwork. His footwork just become less of a thing in his game as the rounds went on. I think maybe that was the telltale of his age. So he kind of was put against the ropes more often in the middle section of those rounds. But then it was Joe in the latter rounds of the whole fight that started fighting a little bit more outward, and then when they would clinch, there was not a lot of activity there, and they'd break free again. So a lot of Joe's work in the latter rounds were outward, but certainly for the first portion of the rounds. So what we in the third round now, it would be Joe flurrying in, and then both going to work in that clinch hold, and they were both good there. They was both good there. Again, Joe just looked so much less effective than he was from the Jones fight that we saw. Hopkins was definitely preventing him, using him as a punch bag. But Joe was constantly throwing, and although a lot was missing and not many of them were crisp, there were still some shots landing. He was still outworking Hopkins nevertheless. But again, with this one, I still was liking what Hopkins was doing. I think initially he was going about the fight generally in the right way, trying to play counter, trying to be elusive, trying to meet Joe force on force at the right time. And again, maybe I was being a little bit friendly to Hopkins, but I would have given him the third round as well.
Yeah, I think just about maybe.
Yeah,
I
it
thought
was
the third
getting
round was
close.
where, yeah, I thought the third round was where Joe really started to pick it up.
Yeah.
He started to work Hopkins' body a bit, and he started to also move his own feet a lot quicker. I felt like in the first couple of rounds, whether he was shocked by the knockdown, I don't know, but I felt like Joe Calzaghe's footwork was a bit sluggish. And just towards the end of this third round, he just looked a bit sharper in every way. And I also thought at the end of the third round, Joe Calzaghe looked a bit pissed off. And I think,
Frustrated. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that may have been the catalyst to him perhaps upping his game a little bit, and not just upping his game, but upping his intensity to the
Yeah,
point
yeah.
where when he came out in that fourth round, he looked more up for it, more intense. Not to say that he wasn't up for it before that, but his intensity level just looked as if it had gone up a couple of gears.
Yeah. Yeah, he was trying to, really take it to Hopkins and keep him on the back foot all the way through. You're right, from round 4. This is when, for me, I felt like he was really beginning to take hold. What did I put on my notes? I did notice as well. A couple of times when the camera was in close, you see Hopkins with his mouth open, doing little deeper breaths with each other, because he's very, very good at disguising whether he's tired or hurt. Hopkins, you would never really know whether he's hurt or getting tired. Okay, the work rate kind of was a telltale sign, but he still held very good form and always looked really relaxed. There was a lot of pressure being put on him, more than any other boxer had put on him, and he was very poker faced throughout it. Joe's work rate with the game was the main problem for Hopkins. Trying to, if you're going to play counter, you've got to at least try and throw back either more effective shots very often, or you've got to throw equal amount as he comes in. But he wasn't able to keep up with this pace playing counter, and the counters just wasn't giving him results enough. Wasn't looking like he was ever going to rock Joe again. And perhaps his boxing style is not really like that. He's got such a lovely cross right shot, but he just doesn't carry it with loads of power. It's almost like a amateur style right hand. It's there to score. I would say the biggest problem with Hopkins' game in trying to look like he was trying to match Joe at this point was the fact that he just wasn't doing effective flurries in return. It was always single and double shots and then smother, whereas Joe would just string together flurries, not always looking pretty though, which probably was never Joe Kawasaki's forte. Really, he was never a technically great looking striker. I think we mentioned last week about some of his hooks, almost slaps, but nevertheless, perhaps throwing less mechanically correct but more efficient punches was the reason why he's been so successful. I think this is partly, obviously they're very, very fit athletes. I think partly, his physicality is that he's not over muscled for one. He's quite lean and light looking. He's not bulky by any stretch. And I think, the fact that he didn't over pivot on any of his shots, didn't overload, is what makes him be able to punch in bunches as much as he did, and maybe smother these boxers with work rate.
Yeah, he's got a very unorthodox style, Joe Calzaghe has. And what I've noticed over these two fights over the last couple of weeks is he does a lot of, particularly these two fights where they've gone the distance, he does a lot of damage with his body shots in the clinch. So where Bernard Hopkins was, like I'm going to discuss in a minute, about where he gets frustrated and this, that, and the other, and same as Roy Jones Jr., where they got tired and frustrated and knew they were starting to lose the fight, they were clinching up, but they were playing into Joe Calzaghe's hands because they were clinching up, and then Joe Calzaghe's hitting them with numerous shots in the ribs, which is making them more tired, but also winning him the rounds. Some ways, I think as they got tireder, they would have been better trying to circle round and keep Joe Calzaghe at a distance, because I feel like he would have done a bit less damage, because he hasn't got the greatest, he hasn't got the longest reach in the world. Calzaghe, it's not small by any means, but every time they clinched up with him, I felt like he did more damage than he was doing from a distance, because Bernard Hopkins is so elusive. His head work is so so quick. He can move. If he can see the shot coming, he can get out the way. Whereas when you're in the clinch, he's got to just take those shots. There's no way to, there's nothing you could do. You've got to just take those shots to the ribs. And I thought that the fourth round, I thought Joe Calzaghe won the fourth round, but I also thought this was the first signs of Hopkins getting frustrated. Joe Calzaghe up to round 4 threw 206 punches. Hopkins threw 117.
That's a big difference.
Work rate definitely slowed in the fourth and third round. Not so much the third, but toward the end of the third and the fourth round. And if you watch at the end of the fourth round, as they go back to the corners, Joe Calzaghe looks much happier than he had previously, and like he looks relaxed and content and like focused. Whereas Hopkins looks a bit disheveled and a bit frustrated. And there was also a point in the fourth round where they kind of got tangled up, and Hopkins ended up behind Calzaghe, and he kind of clinches him from behind, almost around the waist, just to waste a little bit more time. And I thought, considering it was only the fourth round of 12, I thought that wasn't a great sign for his fatigue or his stamina, that he was already looking at ways to waste time. And, that's kind of a story which goes on later, is him trying to waste a bit of time. With the low blows, he took a lot of time, which when it didn't seem like a particularly consequential blow. But what did you make of the fifth?
Fifth round, again, I think it was just going in Joe's favour. I just think the fight was getting more comfortable for him. The work rate was still there, which is what he seems to be all about. There were moments where Hopkins was, getting some counter shots off, but it just looked like there was less precise than he had been in previous rounds. And another thing I noticed about Joe's game, he hadn't been able to land effective jabs in those first sort of like 3-4 rounds. But this fifth round saw you actually working the jab from out at range as well as being effective in that clinch and close quarters. So it telltale a sign that maybe Hopkins was beginning to fatigue, and maybe that age was beginning to be a factor really. We did talk about this briefly off air, didn't we? And I'd like to reiterate really that it wouldn't have been great to see them both fight each other at their peak, because I would say that Hopkins would have not broken as quick as he did. I think he would have definitely have taken Joe into latter rounds before Joe would have started out working him, if at all. It would have been really, really interesting. But the fight was what it was. And I think this fifth round really, it started to make you think, well, your Hopkins has got to do something different. He's either got to press Joe down, he's got to do something to cancel out this work rate. And I just don't think he was of the youth to do so.
Yeah, I felt like this was the round where you could look at it and you could say Hopkins was starting to struggle. Hopkins was maybe not, I don't know if I'd say he was broken quite yet, but Joe Calzaghe was enjoying himself. He was light on his feet. He's bouncing around. He's comfortable. He is raring for that next round to start. Whereas Hopkins is kind of trudging, finding it difficult. If Calzaghe did land a couple of jabs, Hopkins would clinch him up. Before the jabs would land, he would try and circle around to the corners to stay out the way. But as soon as he took a couple of shots, he didn't waste any time to close the distance and slow it down and try and frustrate Joe Calzaghe. But even at the end of that fifth round, Joe Calzaghe's been cut open at the bridge of his nose. And he looks very, very composed. He looks ready, just going about his business. And then on the other side, even though Joe Calzaghe's the one who's cut, Bernard Hopkins just looks, I don't know what the word is. Like I keep saying, disheveled. He's breathing really heavily out of his mouth, and he just looks tired. And when you think that they're not even halfway through the fight at this point, someone of Joe Calzaghe's quality take advantage of a tired fighter.
Yeah.
And he does, obviously, in the latter rounds.
Yeah. And I think in this 6th round, I think Joe knew the tiredness was setting in, because Joe was looking to try to be more effective by punching more outward and not just in that clinch. You notice when they clinched up, not a lot was being thrown. Joe was doing all his work, coming forward, throwing, and if there was a way of not clinching up, he was avoiding it and trying to just keep that work rate going. So I think he was hoping to try to chain together something a little bit more effective. It didn't really come about for him, because you can only advocate really how good Hopkins is, being a hard target to hit. I think he stayed true to that skill set all the way through the fight initially. But still, when you've got big numbers coming at you, some are going to get through, and some did, and more so than what he was able to put on Joe. And it was just another round that went in his favor. But Joe really established that. He had a real flurry at the end of round 6. I think he really wanted to start making a statement in each round, and he went on a nice little flurry at the end of that round 6. And it points to me that he's feeling good. He senses the tiredness in Hopkins and wanted to try to see whether he could create some kind of wobble to maybe look to sense whether he can get a finish in any of these later rounds.
You're making a really interesting point about the clinch. So like I had said, in the first 5 rounds, Calzaghe was hitting him in the ribs every time they clinched, and he was probably adding to the fatigue. There's in my screen, there's 1:20 left of the 6th round. They've clinched up 6 or 7 times. Joe Calzaghe hasn't thrown one punch in the body or in the clinch at all. So do you think that, apart from a changing game plan to go from coming forward and from a distance a bit more and working in front of Hopkins, do you think that's also about conserving a bit of energy? Or do you think it's just the game tactically?
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that this was to not waste energy in there. He wanted to do all his work on the outward game, going in, because inevitably if you're closing in on someone who's a counter guy, they're going to counter back with a single or double shot, and then the clinch ensues to smother the aggressor. But it looked like Joe was looking like he was trying to hunt for something more conclusive on the entry in, and was saving his energy for that. Which goes to show that he didn't want to go the distance. He was always going to be hunting for that finish. But Hopkins, even at his failing age, in terms of being his peak, was still too good to be put away. And that part, unfortunately, was the most impressive part of what Hopkins did. Was really his prevention of being damaged with this barrage of punches.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that someone who is a legend of boxing, like in this big fight, really all you can say from probably round 4 onwards is that he avoided getting hit very, very well. He's obviously still got that pure skill to to move. And a prime example of that is so at the end of round 6, punches thrown, Calzaghe's up to 322, and Bernard Hopkins is still under 200. And I think when I said it in round 4 or 5, he was on 177. So he's only gone up 10 or 15 punches since then in 2 rounds, whereas Calzaghe is almost added, I think, 100 or something. So the work he's completely outworking him at this point. Hopkins looks he does look broken now, I gotta say. Unfortunately, he's 43. You got to give it to him. And I gotta say that Bernard Hopkins at 43, his body movement and his head movement is still as good as any current boxer today.
I mean, damage limitation, and that is something that's obviously very, very natural for him. It's instinctual, but you can't win fights just on that alone. You've got to throw back, you've got to counter, and he did, but mainly with single shots. And whenever he did throw flurries, they were almost like just touching shots, really, and just trying to be active back. There was no precision on Hopkins' flurries in return. The only time you saw Hopkins being precision orientated was when he's throwing those single counters, and single counters are going to get lost in the ocean of shots that were coming from Joe.
Joe Calzaghe throwing some nice right-handed jabs, really working them well, and he nailed a couple which looked quite good in round 7. I wanted to ask you something just briefly. In the build-up to this fight, Bernard Hopkins said, "I would never lose to a white boy." And then it's ironic because this week a current boxer said the same thing. Let me just find his name. Now, I don't have a massive problem with it, but my problem with it is if Joe Calzaghe said it, if the roles were reversed and Joe Calzaghe said, "I would never lose to a black man," he would have been punished, probably banned from boxing for years. And I don't like the double standard. Now, I've always said, and I'm very clear about it, I'm completely anti-racist. I don't like it. I don't agree with any discrimination of any kind. I think it's ridiculous. However, racism is racism. Discrimination is discrimination. It's not okay for one race of people to discriminate against another. Doesn't matter what color they are.
And that's
kind of my issue with it.
Sometimes conversations of similar come up in the gym when we're talking in groups after training. Some people stay late. Because I think it was Adesanya who also said he'd never lose to a white guy. I think.
I don't know about
he said it.
I'd have to double check.
And I think if you have a look in one of his interviews in one of his last fights that he had, he had stated something along those lines. And you would think. Yeah, you would initially think.
Say the current guy who said it was Divine Haney. He's the current WBC lightweight world champion.
Right.
He's 21, so he is a kid. He was asked about the possibility of fighting Ukrainian world champion Vasily Lomachenko. And he said, I'd never lose to a white boy.
Again, it's such a difficult topic to talk about because it can bring up a real can of worms. It really can.
Of course,
of course, racism in any meaningful level is wrong on both counts, on both sides, on any side. For me personally, my parents, I've got black friends, and I will joke racially with them. I've got Muslim friends. I joke about Muslim things. I'm more one of these people that if something's uncomfortable, joke about it, dig about it mildly. Of course, everyone knows a cut off where it gets distasteful. As long as you're not trying to induce any kind of violence on someone or doing it in a derogatory way.
Bully them.
So although some of these black boxers and black MMA fighters have stated such a thing, I don't think it should be wrong, but when it is on the other foot, it seems to be wrong. But hey, I think initially there's too much sensitivity about.
Of course,
I just think people should be left. And it's strange, a black person calls another black person the M word, but you can't get a white person calling it, which is a bit odd to me as well. I just think all of it is hypersensitized, and I just don't think it should be. Like, comedians of old, because we're similar age. I think, are we similar age? I think we are. I'm 46. Yeah. So, in the 80s, you get a lot of, comedians talking about chalky white, and there was a lot of racial jokes. But now you can't have that. And I think that's kind of a shame. I think the whole point of comedianship and joking about is that it desensitizes potentially very, very
volatile situations.
And I just think you should be teaching young people resilience to things. Of course, there's got to be that balance where what is too far. There's still got to be some rules out there, but to become hypersensitive, it just means this racist word gets thrown around way too much. Racism works on both ways. I've got called racist on Facebook not long back. or for someone who's got a Facebook friend, and you know, I had to point out many reasons why, you know, it's just not true that I'm just not, I can't be. But I will joke about it. Yeah, that's my stand on it without getting too deep. I mean, potentially it's wrong. I think, look, they're fighters. Sometimes they talk about their mums and stuff like that. You know, they're really, you know, they're trying to create aggravation on each other. I say let them say what they want, no matter what color they are. But I know it ain't like that. But certainly it should be fair. If you know,
it's got to be the same for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
At the end of the day.
But yeah,
that's how you get rid of discrimination, is by making it the same for everyone.
Same, yeah, exactly. So yeah, there is, but I think generally, for the best part, from my experience of people, I don't care whether a black guy calls me something to do with me being white. It don't really bother me. One thing that I wouldn't, you know, I don't particularly like is to be called racist when I'm not. That's you know, that's kind of a bit annoying, but I'd like to think I've got thick skin. I am quite resilient. My parents are very anti-racist, which is kind of strange, really, for their mid-70s, and they've always brought me up to be accepting of anyone. I mean, they're very, very strong, and like I say, you know, there's been times that I've wrote things on Facebook, and I'll be on the phone to my dad a couple of days later. He goes, "Oh, you want to be careful what you're right, son. You might be, you're like Big Linton. I mean, Linton's a huge man. You know, I've trained him on and off for many years, been my friend for many years, and I'll always make a little comment here and a little comment there, and he knows what I'm like, and we have a laugh and joke about it. He goes, don't go upsetting Linton, blah blah blah. You can't say that. I'm like, Dad, it's fine. You know, they all know that I'm lighthearted with it, and you know, Linton continues to be, you know, one of my best friends, one of my most trusted friends. So yeah, I mean, we've ended up talking about my personal
no, but it's fine. It's like
but going back to what you're saying, yeah, certainly if racist things are going to be taken out of the equation, it has to be on both sides, but it doesn't perhaps seemingly appear that way. But I don't watch every single interview to know whether, you know, a white person has stated anything. You just think you would hear about it, because I think it would be blown up and made a big ordeal of. But
I mean, so a couple of things I'll say is, my initial point was that if Joe Calzaghe had said the reverse, I believe he would have probably been banned, stripped, and, you know, whatever else. Just in relation to a couple of things you said, with stand-up comedians, I do think it's gone a bit too far in terms of like what they can joke about, because my opinion with stand-up comedians is, you go into a comedy show, so accept that everything from 7 o'clock when it starts to 10 o'clock when it finishes, everything which has been said, the comedian doesn't mean it's a joke. I go in with that attitude. So I go in with the attitude that everything he says doesn't necessarily reflect what his real life views are. Because it's a comedy show. There's going to be jokes. I do think there's a difference between maybe you having a laugh or a joke with your friends or people who you know well. So kind of all parties are in on the joke, if you get what I mean. Everyone knows it's a joke. Everyone knows that you know, no one's being nasty about it. It's not bullying, or it's just banter, if you like. I hate that word, but for the sake of this. Whereas if I went on Twitter and said something that would be acceptable between me and you, but then I went and said that to a stranger on social media, then that is different. And because you don't know if that person's you know, okay with it. You don't know if they're not in on the banter or the joke. You can't kind of decide what is acceptable for someone else. Did you know what I mean? And it, you know, it's difficult then, isn't it? But then it's like it's gone like the complete opposite direction to a previous, where now it's like you can't say anything without being called racist or homophobic or this or that. And it's kind of like when I did a show, when I did the unscripted and uncensored show with Lee Remedios, So a couple of people were asking about Fallon Fox.
All right,
and when
I know
when
about
we were
this
talking
fighter.
about it, so Fallon Fox, for anyone who doesn't know, was a female MMA fighter who was previously a male and had transitioned to a female.
Yeah.
And she had several fights at a professional level with women without the women, her opponents, knowing that she'd previously been a man. So I was trying to ask Lee about this, but also discuss it. And I was tying myself up in knots because I was trying to make my point, but also not say anything that could be taken the wrong way or out of context. And it was really, I found it really difficult. And in the end, Lee kind of said, look, I know what you're trying to say. I will say it because I don't care. Because I was like, and I was finding it really difficult. And really all I was saying is, look, I found it bang out of order that she was fighting women when she hadn't told them that she was previously a man. That was not, that's not acceptable to me. I don't want, just like I don't want to go and watch a UFC match between, I know Holly Holm and Brock Lesnar and watch Brock Lesnar get a mount and a ground and pound and smashing her face in for 15 minutes. I don't want to, you know what I mean? I find it quite upsetting because, let's face it, as Paddy Pimblett said on my show before, when fighters, boxers and MMA fighters go into the ring, they put their lives in their hands. And if the other person is cheating or has got steroids in their system, has got whatever it may be, in the olden days when they used to put stuff in the boxing gloves, the other person, it's not an even playing field, then that makes a problem because someone can get hurt. And in Fallon Fox, look, afterwards, when everybody found out, if there's female fighters who are happy to fight her, great, that's fine. I've got no problem with that. It's not something that I particularly personally, in a personal opinion, it's not something that I'll be like jumping around to watch. But I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with her. I don't have a problem with her choices. I don't have a problem with any of that. I will always treat people with the respect that they treat me until otherwise, regardless of their past, what they've done or said previously.
I totally get what you're saying. This is the difficulty of trying to be overly politically correct or to be all inclusive. Literally, sometimes you just cannot be 100%.
You can't even say what you want to say
and you can't even be 100% inclusive. Someone's always going to get left out. Someone's always going to be potentially offended. And I'm in agreement with yourself, what you're saying, that because they don't even have to have a full operation. They can still have a male genitalia, but just lower their testosterone levels to within a certain range. But the fact is, their skeleton's still more evolved. They have larger lung capacity generally.
Larger muscles.
I think it's like faster reflexes. Yeah, there's a lot of things that still stay as an advantage after puberty, and I do see some really interesting discussions. But listen, you'll very rarely, or say if they did open it up across the board in the Olympics, let's just say, you will be seeing women's records tumbling one after the other, but you will never ever see
the reverse.
A woman, becoming a man doing the same. They will not come onto the scene and do something absolutely amazing. Okay, possibly in darts or snooker, but when it becomes down to real physical, hardcore ability, of course a man's got the advantage there. It's just not fair. And so, unless you can do a transsexual games, you can't. It's just not gonna. Someone's going to be left out, and it's just unfortunate. It's just the way it has to be.
Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to say very quickly, and it's ridiculous that I've got to clarify it but I will clarify it just so I'm kind of everyone's clear. I've got no problem with Fallon Fox whatsoever. My issue was that she didn't tell her opponents that she was previously a man, and so they didn't have the opportunity to decide whether they were okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of life choices or whether transgender whether transgender people can take part in professional sports. Yes,
Yeah.
I have issues with some of it, but I do not have a problem generally with them, being included and having stuff. I believe there is a bit of like the issues that you just raised with the records, and I think what we need to be very careful of is where these sports and organizations are trying so hard to be inclusive to transgender athletes that they're actually being discriminatory to female athletes.
This, I mean, this
I just
is
wanted to
exactly
quickly
right.
say there, Dan. Sharon Davis, former Olympic gold medalist swimmer, she speaks out on this a lot
She
on
does.
social
I've seen
media.
her.
She's doing a really excellent job in raising awareness. And this is not about like discriminating against transgender people. This is making sure that women athletes don't be what's the word? Kind of ostracized and pushed out of competing in professional sports. Because imagine how you'd feel if you had a teenage daughter, say, who's been training to be a swimmer from the age of 10. She's been going to swimming every day because she wants to be a professional swimmer. She's very good at it. She played, she swims for the county, the country. And then she gets to the Olympics and she's up against someone who was previously, like an average male professional swimmer. That average male professional swimmer will probably beat her. It's just an unfortunate fact of genetics. Is that fair, really?
No.
Now, I'm not saying whether it is or it isn't, or I'm not saying, what I'm asking the question is that something that we need to look at as a nation, as a sports, as organizations, and find a solution? To find a solution, you have to be able to talk about it. Now, I guarantee you that just by digressing into this, I'm not even quite sure how we got here, but we're here now, so we may as well carry it on. I guarantee you that I will get some messages or some DMs or something telling me that I'm transphobic, even though I've stated probably 5 or 6 times in the last 10 minutes we've been talking about it that I'm not. I'm all for inclusivity. I'm all for Fallon Fox being able to fight. I'm all for this, that, and the other. What I'm against is female athletes losing the opportunity to achieve their dreams because we're trying so hard to not be discriminatory against transgender athletes that we're just letting them go into female professional sports and potentially take over.
I don't mind, if someone really feels that they're a woman in a man's body or vice versa, and they want to live their lives the way they choose to live. Okay, that's fine. But I think when you're competing, that's just a different issue, and it does need to be discussed a lot more. It needs to have a scientific approach, a factual approach to find out what's what. I think some people are still uneducated in it. I mean, by no means are we specialists in it, but I think there is some common sense to it. And I think the strongest point is the fact that, records will tumble and fast and out of reach of a full-fledged woman. And I think surely the feminists will be in uproar about it. I think it'd be so fair on the women. Come on, we're already trying to create, and rightly so, we're trying to create some even coverage of women's sport along with men's sport, and so it should. But this is just going to push them out even more. It's going to go against it. I just can't see where it's. I can't see where it's going to be good for any sport that we choose to include transgenders. And like I say, if it's darts, it's snooker, maybe that will matter a whole lot less. But down to physical sport, it's going to make a difference. It's got to be.
Yeah. So just quickly on this, I'd just say there was a transgender powerlifter who broke records. I think I'm not sure if it was the world record or if it was I think it was the world record. and by breaking the record, I mean absolutely smashed the record. I'm just trying to bring it up now to see the difference. But I believe that person has actually been. Her name is Mary Gregory. I think she's been stripped of it now because people, kind of acknowledged how ridiculous that is. That you're talking someone who could have not had the kind of the operation, could have all male, like a male body effectively, and then go and do weight, like a deadlift or power lift. I'm sure you could tell me from a gym that your male fighters power lift a lot more than what your female fighters do. Generally.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Mary Gregory, an American powerlifter and strength coach. She just got off that. She went on her Instagram page to say she'd gone 9 for 9 at a competition. She'd broken 4 women's world records. She'd the Masters World Squat, the Open World Bench record, the Masters World Deadlift record, and the Masters World Total record. So she basically broke all these records. However, despite her enthusiasm, Gregory's win seems to have angered a few other athletes, including former British Olympic swimmer Sharon Davis and British track Olympian Kelly Holmes. Davis took to Twitter, basically saying it's pointless, unfair, and ridiculous. It's a woman with male biology. And it's just that sort of thing. I was just trying. I thought I saw just in the Google search that she got stripped.
There's another transgender athlete, a Canadian athlete. He's 37 at the time of winning a world record for cycling. Rachel McKinnon. This has become quite a well-known case, but it was was competing as a male cyclist, like this indoor cycling, and was very average. And then transgendered and are now breaking Masters world records and winning record after record, race after race. I mean, that's just another example of how unfair it is for the full-fledged women. I don't know how you could say it without offending, but this is just unfair on the women competitors.
How can the female? So in these two examples, how can the female or the biological female powerlifters, the biological female cyclists, how can they be expected to compete with that? Because no matter how hard they train, they will not have the same advantages that the transgender athlete has. Now, that's it's no one's fault that it's not an even playing field. But are we going to do we just ignore it and say, well, Usain Bolt is faster and stronger than everyone else was, so it's just it's like just that's it? Do we just say that, or do we try to come up with a solution with the organizations and the people who make the rules and the governments, and we try and work out a solution? But I'll say again, you cannot come to a solution if you don't let people speak out on it without being shouted down as, oh, you're transphobic, you're this, you're that, you're that, just because you're trying to say, look, this is not right. Can we do something? And, like people like us and Sharon Davis, we're not saying, boo them out of sport, don't let them, we hate them all, blah, 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 blah. We're saying, yes, we want you to be able to do professional sport, etc. Let's come to a solution together and make it happen without discriminating or ostracizing the female athletes.
I
don't see the problem
difficult. But being hypersensitive is not going to help discussions and help people move forward. Being hypersensitive makes people point the finger and call names, and once you stop pointing,
and that's how we got onto it, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, that's as bad as someone actually being racist or being transphobic. It's equally as bad, because it stops anything moving forward. Everything's got to be discussed. It's got to be discussed maturely, and as much as you can factually, and that's why science has got to be brought in, biologists, people who really do know the know. But I mean, really, I suppose I don't know whether it's possible to do, but you'd have to get some kind of transgendered version of these sports. But would there be a big enough sporting element, to make that viable? They're the kind of things I don't know. I don't know how broad transgenderism on both fronts really is. I don't know, population wise, and it's obviously a lot smaller. So them choosing to be professional athletes is going to be small, and it's a very difficult subject to find an answer to. But I fall back on life is not entirely fair. That's something that I was brought up to accept. You do the best you can do for yourself and those that you care for around you, and but you're not going to succeed at everything. You're not going to make everyone happy in your life. You've got to be accepting that some things are just the way they are, and there's not a lot you can do about it. This is why, as well, in schools, I mean, my kids, when I went to their sports day, I mean, sports day to me as a kid it was such a big thing for me to try to obviously win. But I remember being proud that I got third, and or got into the final of a race was a big achievement. You would accept the status, even though it weren't always the best. It made, I was taught to be happy that I had got somewhere. But now they do it that, no one's a winner. You're a winner for just competing. Well, yeah, you can, but at least teach kids that it's okay to lose. The achievement is, the real winner is always knowing that I've done the greatest I can do, and even more so to be courageous in defeat. I mean, look at MMA as a sport. If you get someone who's a bad loser who throws their gum shield out and acts like a spoilt child, we look upon them and frown like, that's a terrible way to behave in loss. But you see someone who pats them on the back, hey, well done, buddy, I trained really hard and I've got to give it to you, you beat me. You would warm to that character so much more.
Yes.
There's so much sensitivity, and I think it's all being drummed up from school upwards. And I didn't like it when I went along. I thought I was going to go along and see whether my son could win the running race. But they would all win it, and they've all got a winner's sticker on their form. And I'm just like, well, okay, that's all very nice, but it ain't teaching them for the real world. When they go for an interview and there's 10 other people going for it, how are they going to feel when they don't get that position? They don't have to deal with it in adulthood. Part of life is, accepting that you can't have it all your own way. And when it does go your way, great, embrace it.
Indeed. The final thing I'll say on this just quickly is what annoys me is when people throw around terms like racist, Nazi, homophobic, transphobic, all these different terms. I feel like when you just throw that around because someone's got a different opinion or opinion which you don't agree with, and you just throw that at them because they're discussing a certain subject, whether it's race or it's transgenderism or it's whatever it may be, and you throw around those terms when it's when it's clear that that person's not being racist or homophobic or they're not a Nazi. I feel like it takes away from the seriousness of those situations. Like the Nazis murdered millions of women, children, and people. So if you're throwing around that term, I feel like it does take away from what happened to those people. Or racism. There was things like people like slaves and people who really suffered through years of horrific circumstances, and you're calling someone racist because they've got a different opinion to you, or you're telling someone they're transphobic because they're trying to discuss something in a polite and sensible fashion, like me and you have just done. That takes away from the idiots who are telling transgender people on social media to to kill themselves and to they're freaks and this and that and the other. They're the people who are transphobic and a problem. The people who are just trying to discuss this to make sure it's fair to everyone and female athletes are being protected, etc. It's ridiculous. And using those terms in such a loose fashion just because you disagree with someone does more damage than good, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is such a broad, difficult topic
to do a
talk
whole
about.
3-hour podcast on this.
Absolutely. I mean, you're touching on several subjects along the same lines that each of them can have a whole podcast about them individually: transgenders, racism, and so forth. Really difficult subject to discuss, but one that should be discussed, and I'm not shy to discuss it. I don't mean to offend anyone. Like I say, I've got a multitude of friends. I've got friends that are gay, lesbian, black, white, different religions. I don't agree with a lot of religions. I'm happy to debate about that as well. But I don't debate without doing some kind of education, so I can put forward my reasoning and my view. But likewise, I'm not afraid to have my view being shown up to be actually wrong, and the reasons why I put to me, and then to change my view. I'm not stubborn and won't accept when I have got something wrong. I may have misunderstood something and be like, oh crikey, I never thought of it that way. In hindsight, I've now changed my. Thank you for enlightening me. But that happens with discussion, right?
Indeed. I've and just to say as well, I've had guests on my podcast who are male, female, other kin, transgender, gay, straight, bisexual, all on my podcast. So, I've to say I'm discriminatory against anybody is ridiculous.
What would be interesting is to put particularly with the transgender conversation to a transgender and ask what they think.
Do you know what? I think people would be surprised at the amount of transgender females who would actually agree. But so often, because of the hyperbole of social media, they see maybe a transgender friend in an argument with someone about this subject, so they instantly jump in to defend their friend because they feel like they're being attacked, when really maybe at the start it was the other way around. But anyway, we have completely the wheels have come off this podcast well and truly. I don't know what it's 11:30 at night. We've gone from round 8 in Joe Calzaghe versus Bernard Hopkins to transgender in sport. I do not know how the hell we got there, but
it was an interesting conversation.
It was a very interesting conversation. I might isolate that whole 20-minute clip and put it out there, or I might completely edit it out of the podcast.
No, don't do that. We just spent half hour talking there.
So we're gonna have to speed it up now anyway. Round eight we're on of Joe Calzaghe, Bernard Hopkins. The end of round 8, Joe Calzaghe has thrown 451 punches.
It looked like Joe was at times touching Hopkins up out at range. It was like he was throwing shots almost knowing they was going to land. Not great deal of beans behind it, but that's not Joe's style. But it looked like Hopkins was getting touched up a lot in this round. That was my observation.
He only landed 140 of those 450 though, which is interesting, and it shows again how quick Bernard Hopkins' body and head movement were. He's really, do
you know what though? I don't think it's reflexes or speed. I just think he knows how to get his footwork, his body location and head location into zones that are hard to angle your shots on. Because it's not like he's doing a Nassim Mohammed types of deflections and trying to ride out shots. He's getting his body location, his head into certain areas. Like he puts his head towards the center of Joe's chest. I mean, it's kind of hard to throw shots when something's close to your chest. Very, very good at getting his head in into awkward positions to strike at without clustering up your own shots. I think this is what a lot of it is.
Round 9, Joe, it almost seemed like Joe, it would be like Joe was almost chasing Bernard Hopkins around. But then as soon as Bernard Hopkins was in, as soon as Joe Calzaghe got him within range, he was almost falling onto him. He looked exhausted, and there was points where he looked like he was clinging on for dear life. Metaphorically speaking, he really was clinching, and he was holding him, and he was in no rush to break the clinch.
No.
This is where the time wasting was really coming in.
Yeah.
He just towards the end of round 9, actually, they're in the clinch, and Bernard Hopkins pushes Joe Calzaghe's head right down towards the floor. And I think it was a bit of frustration and a bit of time wasting. As the round finished, we saw what we saw last week with Joe Calzaghe, where when he gets a bit annoyed at his opponent, he's right up in Bernard Hopkins' face, basically saying, is that all you've got? And he finishes round 9 doing exactly that.
Yeah, he did. Was just a round as well. Bernard landed 2 hooks. Was that on round 9? Perhaps it wasn't round 9, or was that round 10? I've got this wrong way round on my notes. Was that the next round?
I think it is.
There was one where he lands 2 really big hooks at the end of the round. That must have been round 10.
No, I think that's round 10, I think.
Yeah.
So going into round 10, Joe's looking a little bit more tired, but generally speaking, when you look at the two fighters, Hopkins is struggling from a fatigue point of view. Calzaghe's he comes out, his footwork is very good at the start of round 10. Very big strides, looking relatively light on his feet, considering the 10 rounds to a war.
Because this is where Hopkins tries to claim more low blows, and goes down and tries to time waste. I think this was really frustrating. I think it was below the belt, but whether it was consequential as much as he was making it out, I beg to differ about it. But like one of the commentators said, we weren't the ones receiving the shot, but that did revitalize Hopkins a little bit. I think having that little breather.
Well, he had like a 5-minute break, didn't he?
Yeah.
In fairness, but like I gotta say, they've got cups in. They've also got those big, huge waistbands going round. And I thought he made more connection with the.
I mean, in MMA we see kicks going in clean and knees going in clean to the groin. Kicks and knees.
Again, well, we're going to discuss it in that UFC match. Did you see that? Where the guy punches him full force like 6 or 7 times in the.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. But none of the UFC guys take, very rarely take their full 5 minutes. They're shaking it off and they're getting straight back in there. This is like they wear obviously really big protection anyway, and they've got gloves on, and an arm. Trust me, don't do as much damage as legs or a knee. I mean, no way. But this is Hopkins' experience. He knows how to get those breathers to get to the ends of the rounds, ends of the fights. This is all part of the strategy. It's like some of the best football teams in the world, the ones who push it that little bit. We'll tug on a shirt when there's headers, and
you get edged.
That's just the way sport is. I guess but the thing is that low blow, was that the one? Was that the one where his head was being pulled down anyway? Or was that with the earlier one? That might have been the earlier one.
No, that was the other one, I think.
Yeah, that was the other one. I just think he was making a play of it, hoping to get a point deducted for him because he knew he was falling behind.
Yes, I think so. Really, Bernard Hopkins is clinging in the clinch at this point. He does. Like he did get a bit irritated after the low blow. And I think he was more irritated by the reaction of Joe Calzaghe and the fans, where they didn't have too much sympathy for him.
No,
I think that irritated him a bit more than the actual shot. But
yeah. I mean, Joe done a little gyrating behind him as well when he dropped over.
He was happy with it.
It's quite funny. Yeah, it's quite funny.
A couple of times in the clinch towards the end of round 10. Because Bernard Hopkins was going in for the clinch with so much force, he almost toppled the two of them over, which was an interesting part. But Calzaghe's working the jab. He's cruising at this point to victory. Really, I think it would have been a different fight, wouldn't it? At both at their peak, I do think Calzaghe. I know. my friend Alan, obviously who's the owner of Away Day Apparel, said to me today that he thinks Bernard Hopkins would have taken it at their peak.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we'll
never know.
I just
That's the frustration.
Calzaghe was. Yeah, I just think Calzaghe. After watching what he did to Roy Jones last week,
yeah, I mean, to beat Calzaghe, there's two ways to beat him: knock him out, which never happened, and Hopkins is not really considered a knockout puncher, so we'd have to outwork Joe Calzaghe, and you've got to kind of really be honest. Would even in his peak, Hopkins has never been a work rate orientated fighter, never. So could he actually ever outworked Joe even in his peak? I think he would have ran him a closer fight, but I just don't think he could have run along with him for all 12 rounds.
Yeah, it's difficult to see him doing that. Joe Calzaghe's fitness and ability to keep up the same pace through 12 rounds of boxing, it's impressive.
And not ever let anyone capitalize on hurting him, knocking him down. I've never seen anyone really put it on him once they've done that. And perhaps that's down to how good he is at stopping people chasing it up. Very, very, very good. So we're not in there experiencing it to really know, but he's obviously had something about him that was a bit special. He was unbeaten, for goodness sake.
What do you make of round 11 and 12 then?
Yeah. Okay, so let me get the glasses on just briefly. So round 11, I put one of the things I noticed was Joe was just going on big point scoring flurries. He was just flurrying more, which goes to show he was really confident that anything coming back was never going to be consequential to him. I feel like he knew that there was no more power in Hopkins' punches, and sort of like was really boxing with that round with no regard. And for round 12, I just see that Joe was sometimes a little messy, and I just think he was just less clinical, no longer perhaps trying to even put the fight away, and sort of like letting his technique go a bit wayward. That was the only thing. Still think Joe won that final round. It just looked a little bit messier, but I just think it was getting to the finishing line, and just wanted to have his arms put aloft. But it was the decision calling that made me sit up, because I forgot. Obviously, I knew the result because I saw this fight when it happened, but I forgot about how they called out the results. And when I was calling out the results, it had to be set up. Like, what? I was a little baffled. But as we know with judging, it can leave you scratching your head in wonderment sometimes.
Yeah, it certainly can. But overall, Joe Calzaghe did very well. He got knocked down early. I never thought at any point watching this fight back that there was never a point where I thought, this could have gone the other way. Yeah. Like I felt like Calzaghe was comfortable all the way through. Yeah. And, let's be honest, there's a reason he went, 47 or 49-0.
Yeah.
He's an exceptional boxer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a great win for him.
So next week's boxing, we've got a choice of 3 fights which have been sent in. We will cover all 3 in some fashion over the next couple of weeks because people have suggested them. But I will let you pick one. You can pick anyone you want. There's no no pressure from my point of view.
I pick right now. So
yeah, so you can pick Lennox Lewis versus Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Nigel Benn versus Chris Eubank.
Right.
Or Nigel Benn versus, let me just make sure I get this right. I think it was McClellan, but I want to make sure because someone else sent it.
Yeah,
McClellan, sorry. So it's Tyson, Lennox Lewis, Nigel Benn versus Chris Eubank, or Nigel Benn versus Gerald McClellan. I'm great trouble saying his name.
Yeah, I rather like the Nigel Benn versus Chris Eubank. They're the great. They used to not like each other.
Yeah, obviously Nigel Benn versus Gerald McClellan. I think, is that the one that had like something happened after it?
Yeah, didn't he? He damaged him, didn't he? Like really
Yeah, he had a
seriously.
debilitating brain injury.
Yeah.
Left the American paralyzed, blind.
Yes, that's right.
Wow. Well, we'll cover that. We'll also cover the Tyson and Lennox Lewis, but next week the boxing will be Nigel Benn versus Chris Eubank. Exceptional.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, look forward to that.
So next up, we've got UFC 4.
Yeah.
Oof. Standards getting better. Standards getting better.
You're seeing fast evolution. I mean, nothing still that resembles what we see today, but you can see the difference from the previous UFCs each time.
Indeed. Okay, so I'll go through the rounds and then we'll kind of focus more on the final. But tell me like any general overall thoughts just while I bring up the.
Wasn't the first fight was Hoist versus that Ron Van Cleef. I mean, that Ron Van Cleef's a real legend. He's still going strong today.
Trouble, didn't
he? Yeah. He's. I mean, he was a really. He was good back in. I mean, he was in movies like. He was in one of the. What was it with Bruce Lee? Do you remember Ron Van Cleef?
I do, yeah. I wouldn't say I was super familiar with him, but I know who he is, and
he's quite a famous guy, and I think he come up with his own fighting system. He had numerous black belts. On paper, looked like a worthy opponent.
Marine.
But still going strong today. I had a little look. He's 77, and he competed as a blue belt in BJJ at the age of 73. So. Wow. Fair play to him. He was he's probably by now maybe even got his black belt in BJJ along with his other black belts that he had. But fair play to him to still be moving forward with his life. If you remember, he's 51 years old when he done that UFC and was in fantastic shape, real incredible physique. But it was a bit like this was one of the fights that really looked like the first UFCs where this guy obviously had no ground game at all. Threw one kick in a way exposed him to be taken down. All he'd done quite well was hold on to Hoist to stop him being ground and pounded sooner than he did. But it weren't much that went on really. He got mounted. He was aware of the mount though. When Hoist took him down, which didn't take very long at all, it was seconds into the round. Hoist was trying to hold tight to consolidate side control, but Van Cleef was putting his thigh quite close up to his chest, using his knee to block the mount transition. It didn't stop it in the end, but it goes to show he was at least aware. But unfortunately, he was just not educated, how to truly prevent it, other than to stop what was going to be inevitable. It maybe stopped Hoist getting it in the first moments, but Hoist eventually worked some palm strikes. This is something I liked about what Hoist did. He was palm striking him. There's two reasons why that could be. Probably it's because it saves your hands from being damaged. I'd suggest it was going to be that, but the other part of it, he might have been just being respectful. This guy is basically a senior. He's over 50 years old, and maybe was respectful in not doing the guy some serious damage. So he was palm striking him. Got him to turn his back, and from there, not long, and he was rear naked choked.
Yes, Enter the Dragon was the film he was in.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was it was a relatively interesting fight, without being electrifying. We had the Keith Hackney defeated Joe Sun. Joe Sun, obviously, we discussed last week. He's currently in prison. He's not. He is a bad dude. But he's been in a load of films himself. I thought he was going into the fight. I thought, Joe Sun's going to win this. He got choked by a blood choke, if that's a real move, according to Wikipedia.
It's like I think it was like basically he's using his fingertips to drive upwards into the neck to stop the windpipe and blood flow. And Keith Hackney's got that different style, isn't it? It's sort of like like a taekwondo style with the legs and the kung fu style with the upper body. And if you look at the way he does his striking, has his hands in like a tiger type pose. He has all his fingers display. And yeah, he looked like he used the traditional sense of his martial art knowledge to apply the choke. But you know, that's not without Joe Sun not having his successes. He shot in early, and Joe Sun, what's he, 5'4" and quite heavy at the weight as well. Not fat by any means, but a plump guy. And he drove Keith Hackney, slipped with his feet all the way to the cage. So he had some power. Really got underneath the center of Keith Hackney, got him down, got on top. Had a little bit of success there. Ended up getting like a turtle north-south position, where he potentially could have had a choke. Nothing was really truly there. But Keith Hackney scrambles up for there, and where he held on for the choke too long, he ended up getting himself tripped down. So now Keith Hackney was on top, and from that top position, he put this, what do you call it, a blood choke.
Yes.
He put his hand like a C-cup position, which grapplers have been more familiar with. It wasn't literally a C-cup, but it was like an inverted C-cup up to the neck. And I believe you can't see unless you saw a real close-up of it, but it looked like he was pressing his fingertips into the windpipe and, to choke Joe Sun out. And he did. So it was good to see. Different.
Yeah. Next
one-handed
up was
choke.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Next up was Steve Jenham versus Melton Brown.
Bowen.
This was
Bowen, wasn't it?
Bowen.
Melton
Sorry.
Bowen.
This is brutal for one reason. They kind of goes to the ground, and Melton Brown, Steve Jenham has Melton Brown in like a, he's got him in like a choke, but he's on the bottom, and Melton Bowen is kind of he's got his neck and he's laying on top of him. So to get out of the choke, the other way around. Steve Jenham is being choked by Melton Bowen, and to get out of because he can't get, he's in the choke for a while. He's not really locked in tight where he's going to lose consciousness. He's more of like a headlock. And to get out of the headlock, Steve Jenham punches Melton Bowen in the groin 5 or 6 times.
Was that this one? That was the Keith Hackney and Joe Sun, wasn't it? That was Joe Sun.
Yeah, I do apologize. You are right. It was Joe Sun when Keith Hackney, when Joe Sun had him in the kind of headlock.
That's it.
And he just punched him like 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, that's right.
Straight in the groin, straight in the balls. And they were proper punches, not like little digs. Not like what Bernard Hopkins had, where it just grazed the cup. These were full blown.
I was more impressed.
The floor as well.
Yeah, Joe Sun didn't flinch.
Flinch.
His leg didn't even twitch.
Balls of steel.
It was really impressive. Yeah, that was something we forgot to mention in that one.
But
the groin strikes.
Do you think that after taking those 5 or 6 groin strikes, that's why he lost the position and then subsequently got armbarred? Do you not think that had an influence on him?
No. I don't think it was really consequential to what happened in that fight. No, not at all.
Apart from Joe Sun never went on to have children because
but he ended up
5 times.
Yeah, maybe so, and the fact that he's in prison, so it might be a little hard for him to do.
Oh, mate, it was brutal to watch.
It was. But that Steve Jenham one, basically that Melton Bowen, I think he was like a boxer, wasn't he? A good boxer back in the day.
Right. He did quite well actually. But
he did actually do good.
Going back to Keith Hackney, something I just thought of.
Yeah.
Keith Hackney is like a respected, I think he was a karate guy, is he? He's like a respected karate guy, black belt or whatever he is.
Yeah.
How does that work in terms of, you're a respected instructor, and you're punching this guy in the balls like 5 times? It doesn't seem very honourable and respectful. But it is
Yeah,
legal in the tournament.
But come on, look, if you can headbutt someone in the face, which was still being allowed at that point, I mean, it's all part of the rules criteria. Come on, if you can choke someone unconscious, if you can armbar someone and potentially break their arm, heel hook someone and twist their knee out of position, you know, a little punch to the dilly bell is nothing in the big equation. If it's all part of the potential rule set to help you win the fight, and then do so. The whole point of the UFC was to have as close as you can street confrontation as possible, and you know, protecting your tackle is all part of the equation, and so I'm all for it. If it's in there and it's a target, go for it, because if you don't, they might. Yeah, and trust me, if someone's got hold on my dick and balls and squeezing, I want to make sure I have equal on theirs.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
I think it was fair play.
Yeah, I could see why they eventually changed the rules, but you're right. You know, at the end of the day, everything is legal except eye gouges and biting at this point. So it's, you know, it's going to change. But this is the first time we've really seen anyone utilize the groin shots like to that degree, I think.
Yeah. Well,
at this point,
I mean, really, hitting someone in the willy it's not actually an easy target to get. It's you know, it's quite harder than what people think. You know, it's quite a small target for one. Well, depending on who you are. Yeah, it's not actually easier to attain. And for the most part, really, in a true confrontation, I would say it'd be more of an aggravation and make someone, you know, potentially be even more brutal back to you if they do start overpowering you. So, you know, could you imagine if Joe Son, you know, got advantageous position and there was a tired Keith Hackney that was unable to defend himself nowhere near as well, and decided to return the favor? I mean, that's what you got to weigh up with it. If, you know, so, it is what it is. I was when I was watching these videotapes back years and years ago. Keith Hackney was one of my favourite fighters. He's one I was really rooting for him. I really liked his style, and I was a big fan of Keith Hackney's.
Next up was Steve Jenham, who is ninjutsu.
Yeah,
was Steve
mixed karate style. Ninjutsu. That's right. Yeah.
So he was the defending champion. And Melton Bowen, who was a boxer. I thought Melton Bowen did outstanding, considering.
I agree. You could tell he had some awareness,
ground skills.
No,
to speak
he
of.
knew. You could tell by his footwork that he knew he had to stay away from Steve Jenham. Steve Jenham had some distance kicks, but he's not of the caliber of Melton, you know, in terms of the striking. It was always going to go Melton's way if it was going to be left on the feet for long duration. And of course, you know, Steve was making no secret of the fact that he wanted it on the ground in his interviews anyway. So he did shoot in, but although Melton Bowen didn't use proper wrestling defense, he had awareness and he had actually quite good balance. It was only the fact that, you know, he doesn't have that wrestling knowledge that he did get tied up and tripped at the legs and eventually fell to his back. But his awareness was there. He didn't make it easy for Steve. And then Steve almost punched himself out to exhaustion in mount, got himself really exhausted. And Melton Bowen just kept on trying to escape, and he kept posting the armpit to a point where he did actually escape and get back to his feet briefly. But then come the really nice hip toss from Steve Jenham, a very, very nicely executed hip toss. And I think Melton Bowen must have been thinking, oh my God, I'm back here again, because he got thrown with the hip toss straight away back into that mounted position. But Steve Jenham started not looking effective at all with the punches to the face. There was not enough power in them to squash a fly if it landed on the guy's head.
No.
But he tried to do that armpit push again to escape, because he had some success with it. But the unfortunate thing was Steve Jenham adjusted to the fact that he was pushing up at the armpit, and he ended up selecting that arm for the arm bar, and he swung off like a traditional jiu-jitsu, not BJJ, like a traditional jiu-jitsu type arm bar, stepped all the way around it like a post, and put the arm out for the finish.
Yeah, it was nicely done. I thought that the finish, I thought Melton Bowen just got tired and made a mistake. But, you know, Melton Bowen, I thought he did really well defending on the ground. He was hitting a couple of nice little, every now and again, he'd hit like a couple of big shots off the bottom.
Yeah, that's right.
And he was like, he was really shooting his hips up and trying to twist to get Steve Jennum off him. You know, he didn't have a great deal of knowledge in terms of what to do when he was on the ground, but he had a little bit, and he was doing his best to, you know, to really shoot his hips up and try and push him off, but he just, you know, he didn't. Steve Jennum was too, you know, too knowledgeable once he was on top, and he was just waiting for the, you know, those strikes were terrible from him in the mount position, but also he was waiting for that mistake to lock on a submission, and you know, when it came, like you say, he swung it on nicely for the armbar win. Dan Severn versus Anthony Macias. Dan Severn looking very, very impressive.
Yeah, well, he's a big man.
Beast.
I'm lucky enough to have met him at Seni back many years ago. I can't remember which one it was, but he was doing a seminar there. And I didn't get to go to the actual seminar myself, but I could peer in at the seminar happening. And I know it was quite a comical character as well. And what I saw when I poked my head around the curtain at Seni, him doing his seminar, was he was doing a wrestling technique and then picked that person up above his head like a weightlifting bar, and had him picked up aloft. I mean, a big, strong man, and a good wrestler back in his day. He's quite a decorated wrestler. And he had experience as well in Japanese shoot fighting as well. I'm not too sure still whether they were works, but I remember seeing some fights that he had in Japan many years ago. I'll have to recap over them to see whether they're not works, because I know some of the formats out in Japan were worked matches. But he did have some experience out there. But this Anthony Macias, he actually really impressed me for the small duration he was in there. A lot smaller man, good striker, good Thai boxer. That he knew this Dan Severn was going to be shooting him, trying to take him down. Dan Severn did shoot in. He took the legs, and normally you would see people bowled straight over, and he'd go straight to work with his ground and pound. But this guy showed resilience. He kept on getting his legs back out from underneath him into a sprawl situation, throwing some really quick elbows to the back of the head and neck of Dan Severn. And this happened about 3 or 4 times. But of course, Dan's wrestling ability, along with his superior size, did get on top of him. And you know, made quite short work of him, really, and got to his back and rear choked him quite quickly. But I think up until that moment, you know, Anthony did all that he can do in being really explosive and trying to do damage at any opportunity that he could. He's really throwing down those elbows, and you know, any one of those could have created a dizzy spell that he could have capitalized on. But I think partly it didn't, just because Dan Severn was so much bigger than him.
Was this the one where Dan Severn did a couple of like suplexes, almost like he just
That's
literally
right.
just picked him up and dropped him?
I mean, it looked horrible. Yeah, he did one that was, you know, nice to watch, but then I think the second one that he did, you see Anthony Macias shake his head, so he was obviously shaking off some cobwebs from that one. Yeah, it looked horrible. It looked horrible. It looked horrible.
Yes. Okay, so the semi-finals were Royce Gracie versus Steve Jennum, and Dan Severn versus Royce Gracie versus Keith Hackney, and Dan Severn versus Steve Jennum. But Steve Jennum was forced to withdraw through injury, so that was that meant there was going to be a new champion. He was replaced by Marcus Bossett. Royce Gracie defeated Keith Hackney in Danny's dream match between his two heroes.
Yeah, I love this. I remember still how excited I was when I was watching this. I was really on the edge of my seat watching this fight, because you know, I mean, obviously I love Royce a bit, so I've, you know, as we know now, I've got to meet him, and I was a big fan of. I trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, blah blah blah. But at the time, you know, I was a real fan of Keith Hackney. I really wanted Keith Hackney to win when I was watching this fight, and he actually put up a really gallant fight. You know, his striking was looking like it could potentially always be dangerous, but then we see Royce evolved. Royce was actually throwing some kicks and some punches at himself, and in the clinch, utilizing some knee strikes. You know, showing that Royce can do a bit of everything, which he had to adapt, because, like we have noticed evolution of the fighters from UFC 1, 2, 3, and then now 4. Even Royce is showing that he's prepared for when he can't get them down straight away. But you know, it does eventually go to the ground with Royce working from his closed guard, but he wasn't having all his own way. Keith Hackney is a really explosive guy, and everything he does to great effect, and was working some potentially really dangerous ground and pound. Hoist tried to work his guard up a couple of times into a high guard position, but it was shrugged off by Keith. And Keith Hackney got another couple of ground and pound situations going off, but eventually, what I know he should have been doing, he should have been pushing deep in that closed guard. But when his arms started getting caught up, he tried to lift again, and it helped pull his arm out straight, and he got arm barred, unfortunately. But a good, considering that we know going up against a black belt on the ground, and Keith Hackney's probably barely worked any ground situation. I think he'd done pretty well considering.
Yeah, I think so. I thought it was interesting. I think it's like in the first couple of minutes, Royce Gracie went for a single leg, and Keith Hackney kind of just fell forward on him and moved his legs out of the way at the same time. It was very, very clear that gave Keith Hackney a bit of confidence that he could, end himself to the takedown. And he did pretty well after that. And then, before eventually Hoist got the armbar win. Next up was the other semi with Dan Severn versus Marcus Bossett. This did not last long.
No. He took him down and sort of did an arm and chest press. He just stacked through on him, and just stacked up and really just used his superior weight and size. Marcus looked kind of helpless. It didn't last long. Dan almost knew what he wanted to go to as well. When he got that mounted position, he worked underneath his arm very, very quickly, threw that arm up high and just chest pressed him. And if you don't know what you're doing on the ground, you don't know how to get out of that with someone of that weight and size on you, you're going to tap all right, and he did.
Oh, yeah. He got a bit of a whooping.
Yeah.
And then this made the final. Hoist Gracie versus Dan Severn, and I have to say this was on paper the strongest final they've had, where you had two legitimately top fighters, really. It was, so I was very interested because I didn't know who won when I was watching this today, so I was legitimately excited. It wasn't like the most exciting, like one of those fights where you're like, wow, blow for blow, just unbelievable. It wasn't that, but it was very, very interesting to watch these two guys, because it felt like Dan Severn was on top for the whole fight, and then all of a sudden Hoist Gracie had won, and it was like, all right, okay. Because that's how dangerous he is, particularly when he's on the ground.
I think Dan Severn had his opportunity to win, but he was only thinking as a wrestler. I think when he had that top position in closed guard, he forgot he was in a no rules bout where you can headbutt. I think if I was in his corner, I would have been saying, look, you're in his closed guard, headbutt, get your posture up, punch, pick or stand back up again so that you can do a takedown where you have passed the guard. Where he didn't have to be in the guard, but he didn't. He settled for. It's like he was too scared to let him go again. Why? He's much bigger and way superior wrestler, and Hoist wouldn't fight it to be to the ground anyway. He could have disengaged and keep shooting in until he got a really advantageous position where he could have been more effective with his strikes. But even in closed guard, he should have been headbutting. He should have been elbowing. He should have been being more brutal. And I think really, Dan Severn had it all to win, but just was thinking too much as a wrestler.
Yeah, a couple of times he postured up. He had the perfect chance for a ground and pound, or like you say, he could have nailed a headbutt or anything like that, and he just didn't.
No, he didn't
capitalize on it. And eventually, Hoist maneuvered himself around a little bit, because that's all Hoist Gracie was just basically trying to avoid getting hit. And then just maneuvering little bits at a time, little bits around the ring, the octagon, to get that one opportunity, isn't it?
Hoist was doing the right things. He was trying to get his hips out so he wasn't just stacked underneath him, feeling a full expression of the bigger man's weight. So he was doing the right things, skipping his hips out. He had the chance of a triangle that got faulted by a stack. he had his head stuck up against the cage, so he was unable to complete the first triangle. Had to let go of it. Went back to small reverse ground and pound off his back, doing some kidney strikes with his heels. I'm not too sure those being too effective on Dan. It looked like it's just bouncing off his big strong back. But then he angled out and started setting up the triangle from a slightly different angle, and eventually twisted round and locked it in full on. You see Dan try to stack it again, but this time it was a step too far for him. He just did not have the know-how on how to get out of a full-on triangle. But had he done, this was all for him to take. But he didn't know how to get out of it and got tapped out. I was really surprised. I remember watching this when I obviously didn't know the results, and I was thinking, I can't see how Hoist can win this. But it pulled it off again. Fair play to Hoist Gracie.
Yes, indeed. 3-time winner. Next week we have Return of the Beast. UFC 5. Return of the Beast is called. Let's have a quick look at the card that we'd like to do before we go into have a look next week. I'm assuming the Return of the Beast is Ken Shamrock. So that means we're going to have Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie, and Dan Severn all in the same tournament. Indeed. So, quarterfinal bracket for UFC 5. John Hess, sounds familiar. Who's he? Is an American martial artist, early mixed martial art. He's the co-founder of the Scientifically Aggressive Fighting Technology of America, or SAFTA, a martial art with roots in Sansu Kung Fu.
Right.
Okay. We have Andy Anderson, who's a Taekwondo expert. Todd Medina is a Jeet Kune Do. You tell me if you've heard of any of these. Larry Curran, kickboxing.
Yeah, that Todd Medina. I think he went on to do the Olympics for bobsleighing.
Okay.
That's what he ended up doing afterwards. He didn't follow up his career as a fighter. I think that's the guy. I'd have to recap, but that rings a bell for me.
Cool. Oleg Tatarov, who's a Sambo fighter.
Oh yeah, another one of my fighters that I used to follow and really admire.
Cool. Ernie Vedika, an American Kenpo. Dan Severn and Joe Charles. Joe Charles Judo. So they Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock did not fight in the tournament. They fought each other in a super fight championship bout.
That's right.
So we have that's the beginning of UFC kind of going towards the super fights. They also the fighters received nicknames. So Dan Severn is the Beast. Oleg Tatarov is the Russian Bear. Todd Medina is El Tibone. Joe Charles is the Ghetto Man. And John Hess is the Giant with Altitude. Okay. So yeah, that'll be interesting to have a look at.
Definitely.
I would like to think that the winner of the final should go on to fight the winner of. They should have had it. The winner of the final fought the winner of Shamrock and Gracie. I think that would have made sense.
Yeah.
But I don't think they did do that. Okay. We are way over time, so we're going to have a quick talk about Renzo Gracie versus Sakuraba from Pride. Pride 10, was it?
Yeah.
Talk me through this, mate.
I really enjoyed this fight. I've watched this fight numerous times since the fight happened. I really liked it. Renzo Gracie was much better equipped fighter than Hoist and Hoyler. Hoist and Hoyler are very one-dimensional. Although Hoist learnt to strike a little bit, he was not as proficient as Renzo. And Renzo just has a much more modern approach It wasn't just a jiu-jitsu guy. You know, he could strike a little bit. It would never just be a striker. Had some awareness of wrestling, and obviously a very, very good grappler. But one of the things I did notice was that Sakuraba come out with two different stances. He come out initially as a southpaw, and straight away from the get-go, Renzo was going for body kicks on the open side, which is like a modern concept that we do as MMAs now. So that was really surprising to see with my more educated mind as I looked at it again. And then when Sakuraba knew that he was going for those body kicks on the open side when he was southpaw, he would come out orthodox. But when he come out orthodox, he was then kicking the leg of Sakuraba really quite effectively. So normally what Sakuraba was doing to all the other Gracies, Renzo was actually doing to Sakuraba. He's kicking his leg away from him. None of them looked like they were massively consequential where he was giving him a dead leg, but nevertheless it made him unable to be effective with his leg kicks in return to Gracie. So I was really impressed with Gracie's striking. It does get put to the ground. Sakuraba to me is a superior wrestler, and put Renzo down, but we didn't get overly successful there. There wasn't a lot going on for either or of them. But remember when we watched Hoyler versus Sakuraba, and I was saying that, you know, Hoyler was choosing to sit up off his bum, which led to him being head kicked. And I was saying it would have been better for him to be on his back. When Renzo was on his back and Sakuraba was standing and Sakuraba was trying to kick the legs, Renzo was able to stop him being effective by using his foot to block the shin as he tried to kick underneath and catch his thigh, you know, the arse and be effective with those kicks. He was saving energy also by being flat on his back. And then he did what we call a technical stand-up in BJJ terms, and he did it very, very quickly and would get back to his feet. And on his feet, really, Sakuraba, if you really want to analyze his striking, he's got really sharp, nice kicks. He doesn't throw his hands very well at all. So he isn't actually a very proficient high-level striker by any stretch. But, you know, if you stand in front of him like a sitting duck, he'll hack your legs up. He's got very nice kicking technique, very explosive. But the fact that Renzo was going in with strikes, you know, really showed that Sakuraba had no real huge answers to it, really. And so you would end up with just numerous ground situations where, you know, Sakuraba was not able to be as effective as he had been against the other Gracies. It was actually making out to be a really good fight. I can't remember, was there 15-minute round? There was 15-minute rounds again, wasn't there?
Yes, they were, yeah.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, so after that first round, I just couldn't wait for the next round. They was getting all, you know, a lot more sweaty at this time. By this time, having to strike it out more. Again, I felt like Renzo was really making it look quite even. It never looked like Renzo was like desperate to get into the ground. He's almost happy to strike, so much so that he was getting taken down because he was really swinging at Sakuraba, I think, getting confident. So you'd end up with them on the ground again, defending really, really good on the ground. I thought Renzo was doing really, really good. But, you know, to cut really a pattern of things that was happening short, you know, they would get back to the feet, and then you end up with Renzo on the back standing up with Sakuraba, and Sakuraba's just got so comfortable being there. I mean, this is really known as a really horrendous position, but Sakuraba made it his trademark to counterattack and get submissions off, and he did the same here with Renzo. Really, he was very, very comfortable there, started setting up a hammerlock or a 2-on-1 control, sat through with it and then cranked it so far, and it totally dislocated Renzo's elbow, and Renzo didn't flinch at it. He almost looked like gutted he wasn't able to carry on, but you can't carry on with such injuries. Yeah, it dislocated his elbow completely. The fight couldn't continue, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, really, we've spent so long talking about other subjects today. We didn't get to talk about this as much, but I say for anyone, you know, if you haven't seen it, watch it. And if you have seen it many years ago, watch it again, because everyone's more educated these days, and you'll just realize that, you know, how advanced Renzo was above, you know, his other brothers. He was a real modern day Gracie competitor, and loved watching him fight.
He Renzo's more like a modern day fighter than any of the other Gracies. I feel
Absolutely, yeah, he was
more equipped all around.
Yep.
You know, you can't do anything about a dislocated shoulder, elbow, and I mean
no, he's done after that.
even Sakuraba looks, you know, they call him the Gracie Hunter, but he looks genuinely concerned for Renzo Gracie.
Sure. Yeah.
After that, it's, you know, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
You know, and Renzo goes out on his shield. You know, he doesn't really. I know he does get finished, but you don't think he taps, does he?
No, he didn't tap. The referee stopped it. You know, and there was, you know, other times when Sakuraba was beginning to fatigue, because numerous times before this happened, he was shooting in with doubles and singles and getting sprawled and counter-kneed and overhand strike. It was actually Renzo who was doing more damage with the striking. So he was beginning to defend against Sakuraba's shoots. So had this fight gone on, who knows where it would have been. But, you know, the fight has played out as it played out, and Sakuraba pulled off the win again by being creative. I mean, trying to submit a Gracie ain't easy by any stretch, even in an MMA bout. And, you know, to catch Renzo in a submission like that with that kind of creativity and so conclusively so he's going to dislocate the elbow as he did, you know, this really put Sakuraba as one of the all-time greats of that time.
Yeah, the true Gracie Hunter, isn't he? And we're gonna do a little video on the you know, the
rivalry between them.
The rivalry between the Gracie family and the Sakuraba, because it is legendary.
It is.
So we're gonna start doing that, like a little series of videos on MMA, different rivalries and stories and stuff. But we got some other kind of news and updates coming around the show. We're gonna be switching some stuff up and making things better. We feel, but you know, for the time being, we're not gonna announce any of that, because I want to, you know, get it all in place, ready, and then we'll share it all with you. But as usual, Danny, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm a bit disappointed that we didn't get to spend a bit longer on Renzo and Sakuraba, because it was such an enjoyable fight to watch. But we went off on a wild tangent about random shit. So
certainly interesting subject.
We get punished for going off on tangents. So, but yeah, you know, it is what it is. We go where the conversation takes us.
Yeah.
And tonight, that's where it took us. But yes. So what did we say next week? UFC 4.
Yeah.
We haven't picked an MMA fight for next.
UFC 5 next week.
We haven't picked UFC 5. We haven't picked a classic Pride fight yet. Is there any Pride fights which spring to mind off the top of your head before I have a little search?
I don't know whether people would want to cover another Hoist one, but there's the second Hoist fight with Sakuraba, which was a bit different because he actually fought without a gi.
That was in the UFC, wasn't it?
Oh, was it UFC?
I believe it was. Yeah, I think it was in a UFC card. Let me just double check that.
Crikey, I can't remember.
I'm sure I saw it the other day that it was a UFC fight.
Wow.
But I might be wrong. All right. Well, let's finish the story. Because we've been doing them all, haven't we? The brothers and we started it, and then when we've watched the final one, I believe,
it makes sense. It makes sense if we're going to talk about the rivalry. It kind of makes sense to cover it. But I don't mind covering more than, if you want to cover that just to finish it off and get something else in on Pride. I don't mind.
Let's do Hoist versus Sakuraba 2.
Yeah.
We'll do UFC 5 and what did we say? Eubank versus Ben.
Yeah.
And we shall do those, and then the following week we'll start some new and we'll start a new kind of MMA classic fight, and we'll see from there. But that'll be good. As usual, guys, you can drop a thumbs up on the video, share it, spread the word about the channel and all the cool stuff we got coming up and we've had previously. If you're listening to the show, then share it. I really appreciate it if you could leave us a little iTunes review, because that really helps us to find new viewers, new eyes and ears. It's the hardest thing to do. The two hardest things to do with a YouTube channel and a podcast is get guests and find new eyes and ears outside of your current followers and listeners. So anything that people could do, leave reviews, subscribe to YouTube is obviously the best way to support the channel. Absolutely best way. It's free. Just subscribe to youtube.com/ACEpodcastNation for the video versions. And we're available on various podcast and radio apps. Check us out on facebook.com/ACEcastNation, Twitter and Instagram, both at ACEcast_nation. And check out bstacademy.co.uk. And yes, Danny, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Yes, sir. Thank you again. I really enjoyed it, as I do every week.
We've gone over 2 hours. We broke our own rules.
Champion, welcome.